One day, Lisa was a 17-year-old girl with a long list of plans for the future. She spread love and kindness everywhere she went, and she couldn't wait to assert her independence. The next day, she was a victim of a brutal case that shocked Sweden and later the whole world. Her name was reduced to the girl in the newspapers, the girl who was unlucky enough to be taken on the first day she drove by herself to her workplace. It's not right. Lisa's life ended at the hands of an evil man who had no humanity left. But Lisa was more than her horrific death. Let's honor her today by exploring her life and death. This is the full story of Lisa Holm. On Sunday, June 7th, 2015, Lisa Holm left her home in Svogt, Sweden, and went to a cafe in Blomberg. She'd found work there for the summer after graduating from high school. She was happy to have a job and make her own money. Her parents were too. In fact, her dad bought her a moped that summer as a gift for graduating and finding herself a job. They always encouraged her to be independent and ambitious. They were happy to see their daughter grow into a young adult. For the first 2 weeks, Lisa's dad accompanied her on the moped while she learned the way to the cafe and gained confidence. June 7th was the first day Lisa drove to Blomberg by herself. It would also be the day she vanished. At 6:23 p.m. that day, she sent a text to her dad. Her shift at the cafe was over. It had been a good day. Everyone laughed hard the whole afternoon. A few minutes later, Lisa phoned her dad. It didn't make a lot of sense as he'd already responded to her text. When he picked up, he realized it was an accidental call. He could hear voices in the background. Perhaps Lisa was still chatting with her colleagues before heading out, he thought. He thought he could hear his daughter speaking, and her tone of voice was jolly. So Lisa's dad ended the call and waited for his daughter to come home. But she never did. And no matter how many times he called her, she did not pick up. In fact, her phone had been turned off. Lisa's dad wanted to think that her phone battery had died and she'd simply stopped at a shop on her way home. But as the hours passed with no sign of Lisa, he realized something much worse had happened. Lisa had texted him she was on her way home. She wasn't the type to say one thing and do another, and she had nothing to hide from her dad, so he knew she was in danger. That night, he got in his car and made the 45-minute drive to Blomberg himself. He was going to check the area around the cafe and ask people if they'd seen Lisa. He would also drive slowly and look at all ditches and intersections, fearing his daughter had an accident. But that was not the case. When he arrived at the cafe, his blood froze. His daughter's moped was in front of the cafe with its keys still in the ignition. Lisa wasn't careless like that, and she would not switch off her phone on purpose. He quickly phoned the cafe's owner and had him come to the area. Together, they searched through the now dark cafe and all around it. Just before 10 p.m., Lisa's dad phoned the authorities and reported his daughter missing. By midnight, dozens of officers and canines were out looking for Lisa. The case was declared a potential kidnapping. Because the moped keys were in the ignition, the scenario where Lisa had run away was not plausible. The morning of June 8th came and there was still no sign of Lisa. The authorities issued a missing report and notified the public of a missing teenager. Everyone was urged to phone with clues that might lead to finding her. And before long, someone did phone the authorities. It was a couple of farm workers who had found Lisa's moped glove in an abandoned barn just across the road from the cafe. Ironically, the officers had searched the barn on the first night, but did not find the glove. Sadly, the farmers touched the glove and handed it to the barn's landlord, so any DNA evidence that could have been found on it was contaminated. The glove was used as a go-ahead to increase the task force on the case, and a second, more thorough search ensued. This time, several pieces of evidence were found, all in the area surrounding the cafe. Lisa's mobile phone case, her smashed phone, a subway ticket, and a few receipts. All these objects were found down a small gravel road that Lisa's dad and the cafe manager did not even notice when they searched the area. Although the authorities tried tracking the last location of Lisa's phone before it was switched off, they could only pinpoint it to the cafe. After they found it smashed, investigators concluded that Lisa's captor took her phone and destroyed it as soon as he took her. That way, he knew he couldn't be tracked. So Lisa was taken straight from the cafe? On June 9th, Lisa's driver's license and house keys were found. At this point, the Swedish military got involved looking for Lisa. Everything was scoured from rivers to forests. By June 10th, thousands of locals also volunteered to search. To this day, it is the largest search party in Sweden's modern history. Investigators also went door to door through Blomberg, collecting DNA from locals in the hope that they would match it to one of Lisa's retrieved possessions. They figured that since Lisa's captor knew that small gravel road, he lived in the area. But although a good chunk of the area was searched, it was that same barn across from the cafe that turned up more clues. When a forensics team went through the barn, they retrieved human feces. Then they discovered one of Lisa's earrings near the entrance. Lisa's case had become a nationwide phenomenon. Every few hours, a new clue would emerge, but Lisa still couldn't be found. Every single day, thousands of more people would join the search efforts, only to stumble upon small objects and clues. Then, on June 11th, another title made the headlines. The Blomberg authorities had barged into a farmhouse and arrested a 27-year-old man, his wife, and his brother. His name was Nigėjas Belifikis, and he was a Lithuanian national. He lived on a farm just a few miles away from the cafe and barn. What's more, the narrow gravel road that carried lots of evidence connected the cafe and the barn to his home. It could hardly be more suspicious. Wait, it was. Authorities had passed by the farm a few days prior during their search efforts, and when the authorities asked for permission and invited Nigėjas and his brother to the search party, the two said no. The authorities had already gone through the farm the day before, and there was no need to do it again. Yeah, it's usually better to aid the authorities during a homicide investigation. Also, detectives could always check if the farm had been searched before. Soon enough, they would know that they were lying. On June 11th, Lisa's helmet and jacket were found on the farm, hidden under twigs and leaves. The officers called for a forensics team and they ransacked the entire farm. When they entered, the officers were hit by a nasty smell. By the end of the day, Lisa's remains were found on the farm. They were shoved into a small locker. She was undressed with a rope around her neck and duct tape over her mouth and nose. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in Skövde, Sweden. All her life, she loved animals and music more than anything. She also made friends everywhere she went, and she trusted everyone with her life. If she was kind to everyone, why would someone be unkind to her? Lisa's mom, Lena, described her as an amazing girl with a heart of gold. Lisa was the last kind of person to deserve an end so brutal. Her parents were devastated. They thought the area they lived in was safe. What's more, Lisa's life had been taken on the first day she drove to work by herself. Had Nigėjas just been stalking her since she started working there 2 weeks before? Nigėjas and his brother Ivaris were arrested on suspicion of murder. Nigėjas' wife was arrested on suspicion of protecting a murderer and hindering a homicide investigation. Everyone was happy that the search was over and that Lisa's killers had been arrested. But the true horror was just beginning to unfold. First came Lisa's autopsy. According to the report, she died of asphyxiation by the rope that was found around her neck. The final theory would be much darker though. You see, Nigėjas and Ivaris worked as farmers in the area surrounding their house. This included Martorp Farm, east of their house, and the barn across the cafe, west of their house. The barn had an office and a milking room. From the office, you could see the cafe pretty well. And on the wall with the window, the forensics team found several self-gratification stains. They were sent to the lab for testing and matched Nigėjas' DNA. Nigėjas was the worst kind of perv you could imagine. He'd noticed Lisa long before he took her. Taking her life was not an impulsive act. Lisa lost her life inside a dirty, morbid-looking milking room. The forensics team found a rope around a pipe sticking out of the wall. When they recovered its DNA and sent it to the lab, they found a match with Lisa. The detective's theory goes as follows. Najuris stalked Lisa that whole afternoon, waiting for her end to her shift. She had texted her dad already and already got on her moped, putting the keys in when Najuris surprised her. He grabbed her and quickly duct taped her mouth before dragging her into the barn. Then he tied her to the pipe in the milking room and watched her slowly lose her life. This thrilled him so much that he pleasured himself all over her body. Imagine what hearing this did to Lisa's parents. Imagine losing your daughter like this, and knowing this is the last thing she saw before she drew her last breath. After Lisa was gone, Najuris carried her to the farm, where he shoved her in a small locker and filled the rest of it with clothes in a sad attempt to evade authorities. Inside the interrogation room, the brothers were quiet. When they were pressed with the discovery of Lisa's body, they acted offended. Of course, Sweden was quick to blame the non-nationals for the most heinous crime. But the authorities had his DNA all over the barn, and sadly, all over Lisa's body too. He was not getting out of this. When the detectives confronted Ivras with this, he cracked. Najuris behaved strangely on the night of Lisa's disappearance, Ivras said. He rushed home, slammed the door, and washed his clothes straight away. This was unlike him. Then he sat his brother down and talked to him about an alibi, just in case he would have to speak to the authorities. Still, Najuris is pretty certain he wouldn't get caught. Did he really not think the authorities would check the farms around the cafe? Or that Lisa's remains would release a horrifying smell, no matter how many clothes he would cover them with? Najuris was charged with first-degree homicide and held in jail without bond. Before Najuris' trial began, another disturbing clue came out. A video Lisa had seemingly posted on YouTube. It was her last video, and it was titled 13. It was a simple countdown from 1 minute and 1 second to about 50 seconds. Disturbingly, it was posted 13 days before she lost her life. Did she know what would happen? What was this about? Well, it was a silly internet prank. The video was not originally titled 13, and the account that posted it did not belong to Lisa. This is just one of the many things that contributed to when this case became a global phenomenon. With tens of thousands of people following Lisa's story, it's likely one or two wanted to use it to get more attention for themselves. But no one would get more attention than Lisa's demented killer, Najuris, during his November 2015 trial. As he sat there poker-faced and at times looking confused, the prosecution described what was found in his house. For starters, hours and hours of dark and violent adult films. The world he lived in revolved around gender-based violence and misogyny. What he did to Lisa was a reenactment of something he had watched a few weeks before. Najuris' wife and Lisa's family were there, listening to this in tears, shock, and disbelief. He never thought about what he would do after he took Lisa's life. He didn't have a smart plan or a plan at all. He only realized he would have to dispose of the body and wash his clothes. But of course, his marks were everywhere at the scene. And by disposing of the body, he incriminated the rest of his family. Najuris' defense team used this to his advantage. They tried to pin the blame on his younger brother. According to Najuris' defense attorneys, Ivras planted the evidence. There was no DNA found in Najuris' car, they said, so how would Najuris have transported Lisa's body all the way to the farm? Najuris also had the audacity to stand up and state, "I have not met this girl. I have only seen her picture. I know how difficult it is for the family, and I suffer with them. I myself am a father." To think he used his child as an argument, and that he claimed he suffered with Lisa's parents. Much to Najuris' jargon though, there was just too much evidence to ignore. Sure, he managed to transport Lisa's body carefully, leaving no DNA in his car, but he left his DNA everywhere else: the barn, his farm, and Lisa's body. On November 17th, 2015, Najuris was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. brutal. A year later, his attorney even tried to pin the blame on Najuris' wife in a desperate attempt to appeal his sentence. It's infuriating how little accountability Najuris showed until the very end, and how he was willing to sacrifice his immediate family in his interest. It just shows the kind of person he was. But Najuris never got to spend a long life behind bars thinking about what he'd done. In August 2022, a fellow inmate surprised him with a sharp object and struck it in his neck. This would not be the first time an awful perv like Najuris loses his life in prison. Many inmates have a sense of justice, however violent, and people like Najuris tend to last the least behind bars. Najuris' death brings little closure to Lisa's parents. They lost their only daughter in the most horrific way imaginable, and her killer never gave an apology or admitted to what he had done. The only closure comes with moving on and honoring Lisa in any way that they can. By spreading awareness and sharing Lisa's story, they hope that no other family, anywhere in the world, will have to lose their child like this. Hey, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you know similar stories? Let me know in a comment, and before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.